Welcome to the second episode of Stuck in the Middle. Stuck in the Middle is a podcast that explores divergent views. We get ambivalent at times, and on many occasions, we are not sure of which way to turn around to. So, here we look at some psychological issues. And today, we're going to review the book by organizational psychologist and Wharton Professor Adam Grant. His bestseller book, Think Again, offers us some very, very important lessons. So, what does he say? Intelligence is rated very highly in today's competitive world. And I think it's sometimes what people say makes or breaks a person's career in a competitive world. So, how do you look at the word think? Sometimes we say, okay, I think about this situation, or I'm trying to think about that person. Or we say, I'm trying to think about what happened. So either we talk about remembering or observation or uncertainty. So we think about many different concepts of thinking. Thinking forms part of the cognitive processing model in the world of the theory of psychology. So it starts with abstraction, reasoning, decision making, perceptions, etc. Many different connotations are offered to us. So, cognitive psychology basically involves the study of internal processes. That's basically what it is. But today, Adam Grant says, let's move beyond thinking. He says, let's consider rethinking. Let's evaluate. Let's create challenge networks. Let's question why certain things exist because habits weigh us down. And if we do not change, we are not going to progress. And that's his key message. He says our sense of self identity must be rooted in flexibility rather than in consistency. So, in our daily lives, Adam Grant says, many of us favor the comfort of conviction over discomfort. We listen to opinions that makes us feel good rather than challenges us. We see disagreement as a threat to our egos rather than as an opportunity to learn. We surround ourselves with people who agree rather than disagree with us because we just surround ourselves with people whom we like. So the result is our beliefs overrule common sense, and therefore we do not revisit practices that no longer serve us well. As an organizational psychologist, Adam Grant is talking about opening other people's minds. And he wants us to look at some key issues. If knowledge is power, he says, knowing what we don't know is wisdom. The book is divided into four parts: individual rethinking, interpersonal rethinking, collective rethinking, and escaping tunnel vision. Questions such as, what are the best practices I should visit? How can I have a conflict without the task conflict becoming a relationship conflict? How can I make sure that some of those things that I've never questioned before can be questioned now? On this episode, we'll be reviewing the book Think Again by Adam Grant. And to do that, we have two eminent panelists with us today. First, Dato Satinah, a member of the National Education Advisory Council, a former Director of Education in the Ministry of Education, Government of Malaysia. And, of course, Malaysia's king of comedy, Harith Iskandar. Oops, sorry, it's not Malaysia, it's Asia's king of comedy, Harith Iskandar. And to a large extent, I think this episode was very much triggered by me watching one of Harith's comedy shows, where he explains an incident where he goes to Australia and he completes his assignment, disappointed with his grades, goes and challenges his professor and says, look, I referred to 10 books, but you've just given me a B. What's happening? And the professor looks up and says, well, Harith, I understand what the 10 people said, but I want to know what you think about this subject. So maybe let's turn around to Harith and say, Harith, maybe you'd like to narrate that incident and really tell us why you didn't think that much at that time.
Well, you've told the story pretty well. The takeaway was my lecturer at the time literally said, you've read the right books, you've quoted the right authors, but there's nothing in this essay which tells me what you think. Of course, my answer was, I am Malaysian, where I got think. Because in our education system, it's the 3 R's. You read, regurgitate, remember, and regurgitate. Right up to Form 5, that was my process. Whatever the teacher writes on the board, whatever I read, I had to remember dates, numbers, slash, and regurgitate. And thinking was not part of the syllabus, so to speak. So I tell the story, and it's a funny story, and it's a joke, but it actually resonates, and obviously with yourself, because yes, it was a real point in my time, point in my life where it suddenly hit me. Oh, I have an opinion that matters, because I knew intrinsically as a kid and growing up, I knew I was inverted commas smart. It did not reflect in my grades in school. You know, the B's and the C's and the F's in some cases. But I knew I'm okay. But I was not told I was smart by the teachers or the grades. And so it was only after that, when I got much older and through the university experience, which of course was overseas in Australia, that I came away with a sense of, okay, my grades were not a complete reflection of who I knew I was or who I potentially could be. And that really started the journey for me in that thought.
I just want to follow that up with just an observation. You mentioned that in schools we are basically taught to read, write, memorize, and then get on with it. It's a lot of rote memory. But I also remember that in families, in most Asian families, if you ask a question to your parents those days, not today, you probably will be kind of chastised for that, right?
We were slapped.
Yeah.
Those of you who are shuddering, you are below the age of 30. That was a standard procedure. If you had a question that your parents couldn't or did not want to answer at home as well, and it was like, who you think you are? Think you're damn clever, is it? Kena one time. So those days. Now it's the environment. But I have to say now, and I have young kids, they're coming at me with questions. But the difference is they have Google. So in the old days, I could ask my father a question, and even if he didn't know the answer, he could bantai and just whack lah. And I tell the story, like if I ask my father, what's the longest river in the world? Oh, the Umbakwe River. And what he said would be gospel truth until I book an encyclopedia. And what the hell is my father talking about? But now, there's no way my 10-year-old can say, Dad, he would ask me something like, yeah, exactly, like, oh, why is Messi the best player in the world? He would ask me. And I could have just bunned up. I said, you know what? That's a good question. Let's look it up together. What are the different opinions? Because you cannot just make stuff up. Because this is a true story. Very quickly, I tell you, we're supposed to go on holiday. We didn't want to go on holiday to Singapore for various reasons. Most of it being expense and cost. And we told our kids, oh, the numbers are very high in Singapore. Within 10 minutes, my son pulled out, no, the numbers are exactly the same as in Malaysia. COVID number is exactly the same. So, okay, you cannot pull the wool over their eyes. But he's thinking.
He's thinking, yeah. And my younger son, he went to Stanford, but before that, when he was in Malaysia, he went to a private school, which you are very familiar, Chempaka International School. And one day, we had a call from the teachers, and the teachers summoned me and my wife to go to Chempaka. So we went up there and we met up with the teacher, and the teacher said, oh, could you just please ask your son not to do research on the internet and come here and ask me questions for which I have no answers. And so we had to sit down with my son and say, son, can you please not try to show that you are smarter than your teacher? Then he said, but Dad, this teacher doesn't know much. He doesn't encourage us to question. He doesn't encourage us to challenge. So I wondered. So from family, we'll go to the person who was also responsible for one of those people responsible for the Malaysian education blueprint, 2015 to 2025. So how do you think, Dato, we can get our schools to help get our children to think, even though the book itself talks about thinking as a core cognitive process and talks about the information processing model, and then goes beyond and says, today, more than thinking, rethinking is an important skill for success in the world. And there are numerous stories out in the book, just like when firefighters go out to put out a fire, but when the fire charges at them, they don't try to put out the fire, but they fly away from the fire. And so it's rethinking. And so one of the key things that Adam Grant says is, don't get into the first instinct fallacy. It's nothing wrong to change. So to go back to schools, Dato, you have been there so long. So what do you think we have done right, and what do you think we can do better?
Well, I am certainly very guilty of certain things, which I know that now I'm trying to rectify whatever that I can do. The system during that time, during our time perhaps, it was appropriate that time because the way we were brought up. But nowadays, if we look at what is happening in school, students basically, teachers basically, what they do is to complete the curriculum, the syllabus that you have to adhere. And you sort of give lectures. Your delivery system probably just sticking to the textbooks, or you get some additional books, and you don't look at any other references, whether it is from the internet or whatever it is. But I can't blame the teachers themselves straight away, because they are told you better complete your syllabus. But I think this is not going to help the students in the future. After reading and looking at this book, and I realized that there are a lot of things that teachers, parents, and students need to look. First of all, actually, is to do reflection. You need to reflect again. If all these whiles you are able to do the curriculum just by finishing a syllabus, but you're not able to do it anymore because you're not going to produce the type of students, citizens that we want for the future. Rethinking, reflecting, and taking risks in whatever that you do in your delivery of lessons, it is utmost important. You teachers will need to envision what type of destination the students would want to have at the end of it. It's not just delivering your lessons. And you don't need to do all those delivery anymore. They can just check from the internet. Everything can be done, but they need to not only guide them, to envision, tell them these are the things that needs to be done. And they need to admit if there are certain things that is not correct, in their own opinion, you are free to tell me what to do. That is one of the way to do. But I think most importantly, the curriculum itself needs to change. The Ministry of Education, in my strongest view, you need to relook at it, especially after the pandemic. You need to relook at it because evaluation process will have to change now. We are not going to assess our students based on what they have learned. We need to change to assess our students based on how do they think about certain situation or lesson that will actually encourage them to think further. We are busy with 21st century learning. We tell them these are the points. Rethinking, this is something else that they mentioned. But I would say we should go beyond that. We should go beyond that, totally beyond that, because to reflect, to take risks in the classroom, these are the things that teachers will have to do.
Just to trace back a little bit, Dato, most Asian societies, China, India, Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore, why is there this intense focus on completing the curriculum and then getting the results?
Because all parents also would want their children to have how many aces. It is all about academic achievement. It's nothing to do about the wholesome of the child. You're not looking at the child, what type of a citizen you're going to be in the future. So completing completing the curriculum is a directive from the Ministry of Education. If you don't complete the curriculum, you will be reprimanded. So this type of thinking needs to change. And I was just mentioning to you just now over lunch, I think with this new minister, I do not know what she's going to sort of look at it. As long as she's open, Harith, I think now the education system in our country does not belong to the Ministry of Education. We have about 30 over million stakeholders in the country. So there is high time they should start working with the private sectors, the GLCs, people like Harith, for example, people like you, Tan Sri. So engagement is very important for you to allow the system to move on to the level whereby that you allow children to think and rethink.
Let me just go back to both of you. When I was in Harvard, the first time I went into Harvard, it was an interesting thing. They gave us about 20 pages to read. And then we read the 20 pages, and the professor just comes and stands there and says, "Oh, so, okay, tell me, what do you think about it?" And I said, "My goodness, it's all there, the 20 pages. What does he want me to think about it?" But then I found some of the Americans and the Europeans, they're all starting to argue and, put forward different opinions. I still remember the case study when someone built a railway network and some 20 people died, and the Americans said, "This is crazy. This is just totally unacceptable." And then the Mexicans said, "My goodness, we got so many people, so what's the problem, 20 people dying?" So there were different divergent views. And so we have this divergent view, must complete the curriculum, must get people to think. So here we have a situation. How do we actually get started? Where do we get started? Oh, teachers can't be blamed. Children can't be blamed. Families can't be blamed. Yeah.
I think you mentioned this earlier, talking about culture, and we're being very general by saying Asian/Western.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, there's a sense of truth to it, because Asian culture is respect the elders, kowtow, salam, and it's all based on hierarchy of age. So, and respect means, which includes don't question, don't confront. So, and culturally, that is a good thing. And I'm not saying it's not a good thing, but we need to understand that that is a good thing. So, to introduce, imagine going to the education minister and saying, "Okay, teachers, now your students can question you in class." Culturally, that'll be off tangent, and plus, historically, that didn't work or has not happened yet. So I think it also not just includes tweaks in terms of why do we follow the curriculum and let's be a bit looser, but also you have to look at it culturally as well, to a point that sometimes confrontation does not mean, or rather disagreement does not mean that you are hate or opposing. You are just, what is intention? Is intention to hurt, to ridicule, to be disruptive, or is intention to widen, to learn, to experience? So, and you was talking before we were recording about that example of someone, lecturers, scolding you, and then later on, let's go and have a coffee together. That also is on the sport field. The players, especially in rugby, go crunching, whacking, blood flowing, but after that, they go to a pub because they realize that was the context of the game where we confront, we hit, we punch, we foul. But later on, we recognize that the context of the game is important. So perhaps in terms of bringing in culture, the context should be, because in Malaysia, especially, confrontation is seen as membantah. Membantah means to put someone down, to even in comedy. Oh, why you make a joke about a person? You're ridiculing Malaysia in the eyes of the world. Right. No, my intention is to make you laugh. If you feel ridiculed, that's on you. And
to think as well.
If you think, oh, you are putting down Malaysian. No, when I make a joke about Malaysians and Malaysians laugh, I'm not putting them down, I'm bringing them together. Oh no, but we will look bad in the eyes of the world. You think you look bad, that's on you.
So, Adam Grant in his book, he talks about kind of 4 types of mind. He said one is a preacher, another is a prosecutor, another is a politician, and another is a scientist. And I think it is interesting what he says. He basically says, a preacher, they normally do not require any proof. They just preach.
Yeah.
And a politician, no training is required. And if you take a prosecutor, too much training is required. But if you take a scientist, the scientist keeps asking questions all the time. Because, Nobel Prize winner, the guy keeps asking questions for maybe 40 years, and then he discovers and stumbles upon something. And that's what George Bernard Shaw says. Progress is impossible without change. And those who cannot change their minds cannot change anything. That's what George Bernard Shaw said. So I just had these two comments because I just hear both of you. But the culture is something that has its pros and cons. But any culture that's not dynamic is going to regress us back. Yeah, and that's there. But of course, we don't want to lose some of the good parts of it. We do want to respect elders. At least I want my children to respect me. I don't know how they do. But one of the things that I have found when I have argued with people, when I have listened to Harith, when I've listened to you, when I participated in case studies in Harvard, there's always two components. One component is storytelling. In a storytelling, it's easier to ask questions rather than in a lecture.
Yes.
Because it's a story. Oh, what happened to David? Oh my goodness, what happened to the father? Yeah, it's easier to ask questions. And the second one is much more important, is comedy or fun or just laughter. And I think laughter has got the ability to change one from one mind to another very fast. And I always used to say to my children and students, fun is a vehicle to deliver content in a very powerful way. But fun and content are important variables. You can't discard one for another. So how can we bring storytelling and laughter? Sometimes people think comedy is very kind of not important. But to me, I think if you take away what the word means, laughter, like what Harith said, my job is to make you laugh. If I can get laughter and stories inside, can I get people to think better?
Well, I would say that I'm the best person to ask that. But what I can talk about from experience is, I wish that I had, because I did sejarah in school. Do they even have that in sekolah kebangsaan?
Yes,
Ada. But all I remember is Portuguese menakluk Malacca 1511, Afonso de Albuquerque. And then the Dutch came along at one time, then the British came along, and I remember certain dates. But it never struck me as interesting or important until much, much later when I was speaking to someone. I saw a documentary where the story was told to me, why the Dutch came, who they negotiated with, what they saw in Malaysia, why the Straits was important. And I'm sure all these things were told to me in my buku sejarah or my teacher. But the storytelling caused me, and I was already in my late 20s, 30s, oh my God, how cool is this? If I knew this way in school, I'd be acing my sejarah. That's the whole storytelling. And I don't know about you, but I do remember my favorite teachers to this day were those who, I wouldn't say had a story, but had a character that we could all make fun of.
Yes.
But we knew that their intention was always the best. So we had a discipline teacher called Mrs. Kang, who would cut off our hair if it touched and publicly cut off our hair if it touched the collar and all. And she wore a tight tongsam and she looked like a dragon. And that's all storytelling. But to this day, if I see Mrs. Kang, and I have seen her, it's the utmost respect, because I knew that was her job, but you could tell that she had a passion for it, and she brought her character to the whole 6 years or 5 years I was there. Do you know what I mean? I'm not saying, so in a sense that we laugh about it now, and laughter was important. We laugh about those mad dragon teachers and kena caning and whatnot, but it shaped us. So yeah, I don't know. You were in the ministry. To me, it's an impossible job to shift.
It's not easy because they will tell you you're not paid to be telling stories.
There you go.
That is one thing. Tan Sri, I think moving forward, I mean, Harith just now did mention about, narrative of telling stories and all these things. And I love to listen to stories, especially stories of, the historical stories. And like for me, the prophet stories and all this is something that inspires me so much. But I just want to also mention this, probably the Ministry of Education may not be very happy, What I'm trying to say, actually, there are many initiatives all over the world that could bring a lot of happiness into our school system. Yeah. One of them that actually I and my team, Dr. Shariha Khalid, we are trying to bring the concept of happy school. Happy schools is like a pilot, whereby that you empower children, you empower teachers to be able to think. It could be not the way that we all been thinking. It is like a new way of looking at things in the different perspectives.
Can I ask where these happy school come from?
No, the happy school.
Can I attend?
Yes, no, we are trying to do actually what we do. We are bringing the concept because we have seen it in different parts of the world.